What the driver saw. There was a man named Watanabe who was a train driver. He had no doubt that he would work until retirement, as he had been in the profession he had longed for since childhood. That is, until the incident occurred. I started seeing things. That's why I quit my job as a train driver. Mr. Watanabe has been a train driver for 30 years. A train enthusiast to the core, he has been playing with train toys since he can remember, and became what is now known as a train photographer when he was in elementary school. He went on to a railroad-related high school, and then went on to work for a railroad company. I was really proud to be able to do what I loved. But he also added, I was really proud to be able to do what I love. If it hadn't been for that thing, I would have stayed on until retirement. It was really smooth sailing for him until he encountered that thing. The best moment of my life was when I got a job at a railroad company, which I had longed for, and became a station attendant, then a conductor, and finally a driver, which I had also longed for. That is why I never thought that work was painful. That is how much I loved trains. Of course, I still love trains now that I have retired. But I don't think I'll ever ride them again, either as a driver, or a passenger. Many people may associate the speaker with personal injury because he is a train driver. As you may have guessed, this is my story related to a personal injury accident. Well, as a train driver, it is not unusual to encounter an accident once or twice. If you include contact with animals, the number of accidents might be quite large. Looking back, the first time I encountered a personal injury accident was in my second year as a driver. I often heard joking threats from my superiors and seniors that I should be prepared for an accident sooner or later, but I still clearly remember when I actually encountered the accident. It was a cloudy day. The accident occurred at a major regional terminal station. It was during the morning commuter rush hour. The number of trains at this time of the day is very large, so I was really nervous about the time. I was driving carefully and cautiously, but the accident happened at 7:42 a.m., which I will never forget. After passing the railroad crossing in front of the station, from the slowing car I could see a line of businessmen and students waiting for the train on the platform. As we approached the station, I saw a middle-aged man in the line near the end of the platform, stepping over the white line and staring at us. Frankly, I thought, that's dangerous. I didn't want to bump into him, so I asked him to return to the inside of the white line. I was relieved, but just as I was thinking, thank God, he jumped into the train. After passing the railroad crossing in front of the station, from the slowing car I could see a line of businessmen and students waiting for the train on the platform. As we approached the station, I saw a middle-aged man in the line near the end of the platform, stepping over the white line and staring at us. Frankly, I thought, that's dangerous. I didn't want to bump into him, so I asked him to return to the inside of the white line. I was relieved, but just as I was thinking, thank God, he jumped into the train. I thought, oh. I felt a strong impact and the glass of the driver's seat shattered at the same time. I heard the sound of the driver's side glass shattering at the same time. I thought, oh, my God. I've done it. I thought. After making an emergency stop, I immediately radioed a report to the control room. I don't remember the conversation very well, probably because I was totally blank. Since the accident happened inside the station staff and the police took care of the aftermath, as is often said, and I did nothing in particular. After I finished my report, I was in a bit of a daze. I couldn't get the last moments of the man who had jumped in out of my mind. Strangely, I could picture the expression on the man's face as he jumped in. The man's expression at that moment was so terrifying that it was almost demonic. Maybe it is because the man with that expression and I locked eyes for the last time, but it remains in my memory with intense vividness. Even now, decades later. I had heard about such things from my seniors, but when people commit suicide, I wondered if they had that kind of expression on their faces. At the same time, I felt guilty that I had killed someone, even if it was an irresistible force. And after that, I was involved in several personal accidents. But strangely enough, and not out of habituation, the guilt I felt at first began to fade, or rather, it became less of a concern, and I even began to think, what a hassle. It was even worse because the route I was driving was known for having many accidents that resulted in personal injury. It was hard to deal with the aftermath anyway, so perhaps it was understandable that I felt that way. Then, when I was over 50 years old and had become what one might call a veteran driver, I was involved in a fatal accident. At that time, things were different from usual. As I mentioned earlier, everyone who jumps into a train does so while looking at the train coming toward them. But the personal injury accident I saw that day was different. The person fell onto the tracks as if someone had pushed him. I was surprised. It was just before 10 p.m. A man was waiting for the train on a deserted platform with a cell phone in his hand. As the train approached, the man suddenly lost his position as if someone had pushed him and he fell off the platform. There was not a single person around. I had been a driver for a long time, but I had never seen anything like that. 2 weeks later, I met another fatality at the same station. This time it was close to 2300 hours. As I was entering the platform, I suddenly thought of the bodily injury the other day. I thought, I'll be fine today, but then the accident happened. A young office worker fell onto the tracks as if someone was pulling her arm. Of course, there was no one around. The woman was resisting by stooping down and stepping on the platform, but eventually she fell off the platform. It was hard to get people to believe me when I tried to report such an impossible personal injury. I told the command center and the police the whole story. I told them what had happened, but I told it like it was. But at first they didn't believe me at all. They suspected that I might have fallen asleep because of the time of day. Then we decided to take a look at the surveillance cameras on the platform. The parties involved, including myself, checked it out. Then, just as I said, it clearly showed her falling onto the platform with her arm being pulled, with no one around. The policemen were silent for a while when they saw this. They said they were going to investigate it as an accident for the time being, but everyone felt that it was clearly not an accident. I later heard that the accident of the man who fell as if he was pushed was similarly clearly recorded in the inexplicable video. The station had always been known for its frequent accidents, but this was the first time I had witnessed such a personal injury accident. But since several of my colleagues had also encountered similar inexplicable bodily injuries, I wondered if there was something going on at this station. The story spread among my colleagues. One day a little later, I was running the last train. I was thinking that I could finish the day without any problems, as there had been no personal injury by this time. On the way to the station, fog started to appear. The fog gradually became darker and darker. Before I knew it, the whole area was covered in a pure white fog. There are 3 railroad crossings between the station in question and the station in front of it, and after crossing the second one, the area was completely white, and as I approached the third crossing, I could barely see the flashing red light of the crossing. Passing through there, I thought I was almost to the station. However, a while after passing the third station, the station was not in sight. Had I miscounted the number of railroad crossings because of the fog? As I was thinking that, I approached another railroad crossing. I wondered if I had made a mistake, but when I looked at the time, the clock read 23:30. That's when I noticed something strange. Only a few minutes had passed since we left the station in front of us. I felt that the train had been running for about 10 minutes, but the clock had not advanced as much as I had expected. I was beginning to feel something unpleasant. However, due to the nature of the train, we could not return if something happened. As the train continued to run, I could see a dim light behind the fog. As I got closer, I realized that it was the station. Relieved to finally see the lights of the station, I checked the stop position target and stopped the train. I stopped the train safely in the thick fog, but something was not right. I immediately noticed something strange. This was not the station in question. I had stopped the train at a different station. What station am I at? My bewildered vision gradually opened up with the fading fog. The old-fashioned station interior that came into view looked nothing like the station in question. The station in question is a small terminal station in a rural area, so it has 10 lines. This station, however, has 4 lines. I was perplexed by the sight of the station, which I had never seen before, and waited for the departure signal. However, no matter how long I waited, the conductor's buzzer never sounded. I called the conductor on the train phone, but there was no response. Next, I radioed the train operator. There was no response either. The lack of response could be a communication equipment failure, or the fact that we arrived at an unknown station could have been due to some point failure and we were running on a different line. With such ridiculous thoughts, I desperately tried to somehow mend this situation with a convenient interpretation. However, I decided to head for the station clerk's office, knowing that I would get nowhere if I just stayed here. A chill filled the air as I got out of the driver's seat. Each of the lights in the station's interior, and even the moonlight in the sky, were dimmed by the fog. This created a beautiful, fleeting, fantastic scene. In this atmosphere, I looked around each car. However, there were no passengers, not even the conductor who was supposed to be in the last car. I wondered if I had wandered into some other world when I arrived at the station, and then I looked at the station name marker installed in the premises. The name of the station was inscribed there. The station names on the left and right were the name of the station from which I had departed and the name of the station beyond that station, but the name of my station in the center of the sign was marked with the name of a familiar station, OO Station. However, no matter how I looked at it, it did not resemble the station I knew. The modern station and the nostalgic retro-style station are too different, and to begin with, even the number of lines is different. I climbed up the stairs of the overpass, wishing that I could wake up from this mysterious situation if it were a dream. I crossed to the platform on the other side and arrived at the station clerk's office, but there was no sign of anyone in the room. At a loss, I decided to go through the ticket gate and out of the station. There was still a thick fog outside the station. I went outside hoping to find a police box or a house nearby, but there was no police box in sight. Deciding that it was not a good idea to move in this fog, I sat down for the time being. I was tired. Perhaps it was because I had been so tense in a situation I didn't understand, but as soon as I sat down, I felt a rush of fatigue. Should I stay here or take the train onward? While I was lost in thought, I heard something coming from somewhere. I listened carefully, and it seemed to be a song. It sounded like a song, Kago 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 Kago. I looked up from my prone position and heard it, apparently coming from within the fog. But I could not muster the strength to move, so I listened intently to the song. Kagome Kagome, Kagome Kagome, the bird in the cage, when will the bird in the cage come out? At dawn, the crane and the turtle and slip, the front and the back. As I listened to the lyrics repeating over and over again, I began to see something beyond the gradually clearing fog. What is it? I see something black. As I sat there with my knees clasped, the fog in front of me slowly cleared, and the moonlight from the sky made it clear what it was. I was speechless. In front of me was an endless plain, with countless Jizo statues and gravestones. A strong wind blew once. At the same time, the singing stopped. Then something stirred behind one Jizo. Starting with that, black shadows appeared behind the Jizo and gravestones here and there. The number of wriggling shadows increased one by one. If you look closely, you will see that the shadows are young children. The children, all dressed in uniformly dirty kimonos, beckoned to me with grudging looks on their faces. I was running away as fast as I could. That was no ordinary child. My instincts were telling me so. I ran through the ticket gate, ran up the overpass, and arrived at the first car where the driver's seat was located. Breathless, I climbed into the driver's seat. I hurriedly prepared the train for departure and turned the mass controller to the right. The train starts to run slowly. I let the train run, wanting to get away from this station as soon as possible. The scene of Jesus statues and gravestones on the plain spreading out endlessly. The song Kagome Kagome came out of nowhere, and the children beckoned to me. Track 4 will be departing shortly. I came back to myself when I heard the announcement. I found myself in a familiar station. I was puzzled, but I let the train depart upon receiving the departure signal. I looked at the clock and saw that I was right on time. I must have been in that strange station for such a long time, but the clock was ticking on time as usual. I decided that it must have been a dream, but I soon realized that it was not a dream at all. The glass of the driver's seat was covered with the handprints of countless children. After that, I began to see it day and night. At the station in question, I began to see a child pushing a woman standing on the platform or dragging her by the arm or leg onto the platform. However, as usual, no one but me seemed to be able to see them, and they were dismissed as inexplicable human accidents. When I began to see it, I knew I could no longer continue as a train driver, he said. He said that he had only seen the children at the station, but gradually began to see them at other stations as well. And then they began to appear on the train as well. He even had his route changed, but the thing kept following him as if it were clinging to Mr. Watanabe. So he tried changing his job from driver to station attendant, but the situation did not get any better. Mr. Watanabe says, I had longed to be a train driver. I wanted to continue working as a train driver, which I had always wanted to do, but I couldn't continue as long as that thing was still there, he said. However, when you drive a car, you don't see that thing. Maybe it is something related to the station. Mr. Watanabe has done a lot of research on the area around the station. However, despite visiting the local historical museum, he was unable to find any solid information on that thing. He has no idea what that thing is. Thinking that he might someday find himself in the same situation, Mr. Watanabe resigned from his job. He now makes a living as a cab driver. I don't get that when I drive a car. But maybe it is because of that. I often take passengers on trains that have been stopped due to personal injury, usually around that station. Today, too, someone may have had an unfortunate accident at that station. This concludes this story. Thank you for listening to the end.